Welcome again to another episode of Professor Habben's Science Cabin, where again we're down on the farm today, still talking about harvest things here at Tug Hill Farm in Morrison, Illinois. I'm going to talk about harvesting soybeans just a little bit. We're not actually running at the moment. We're waiting for things to dry off, but it'd be a good opportunity to show you kind of how it works. So a soybean plant is a bushy plant that has lots of pods that the beans are in. So you need to cut that plant at the ground so that you can get all of those pods. So I'm going to break one off here and kind of show it to you. So see all those pods? Each one of those pods has beans in it. So we have to cut this plant. See, I pulled it off down at the ground. We have to cut that plant very close to the ground to take that entire plant through the combine to separate out those beans from the rest of the plant. So how do we do that? Well, come with me. We're going to show you. So we do that with a machine called a combine. And this particular one here has a head on it that we use for small grains and crops such as soybeans. And this head, if you look very closely here, it has a sickle on it. This sickle is a knife that moves back and forth. And that is what cuts off the soybean plant so it can be taken in the combine. This item here, this is a reel. If you look at it, it's big and round, and you can picture it goes round and round, and it sweeps that crop up into the head. This entire unit on the front of the combine is called the head. This one has belts, okay? These belts go from the sides and bring the material into the middle, okay? That's called a draper belt. That's a very common head today. There are also machines that do similar work to this that have an auger that carry it to the middle, but the draper is more efficient and does a better job, so most people are switching to drapers now. Comes to a center belt. This center belt carries it up in to where that drum is there. That drum feeds it into the feeder house, which the feeder house is part of the combine itself. So the head is removable. You put different heads on your combine, okay? It removes at this point right here. That's a different head out there, but back here, this is the combine. This part in the middle of the combine is the feeder house. So everything that got gathered up by that head comes in and goes through this little narrow area here. It's only maybe about 4 feet wide, and takes all that crop material in. This whole head is 35 foot wide. So we're taking 35 foot past of that field and squeezing it down to a few feet wide and not much height and carrying it into the combine. So this has to go pretty fast. That feeder house is moving very fast. It's got a conveyor chain in it that moves it back. Takes it up the feeder house and feeds it into the separation area of the combine. I'm not going to open that area up right now, but in general what happens in there is it takes it up in there and there's a rotor, a round rotational device that lays up through this machine kind of like this, okay? Has threshing elements on it. So as it comes around, it stirs those plants up that we just pulled in, those bean plants, and it's the same for corn or same for other crops. But it stirs them up and brushes them tightly down against what's called a concave. A concave is an arch-shaped piece, okay, that goes down around the bottom of that rotor. Made of very heavy metal. Picture it kind of like a screen, but a screen that's got pretty good sized gaps in it, okay? Big enough that the crop material can get through it, but not the entire plant. The beans that you're knocking off, the kernels of corn you're knocking off, the wheat, things like that, okay? There's different size gaps. You can put different concave pieces in your combine to adjust for that. So as that rotor with those threshing elements go around, they pinch that crop material down against the concave, and that threshes the beans out of that plant or the corn off the cob. Separates it as it's going up. It falls through those concaves down onto what's called the cleaning shoe, okay? Well, the cleaning shoe is an area that helps separate what the crop material is doing. So if you look in here, you see all them little fingers in there, okay? That's part of the shoe, okay? Those fingers are adjustable. You can adjust those fingers up and down to change the gap and the spacing between them. And by doing that, that changes the size of the seed that's going to get through there into your grain tank so that you don't get pieces of things in there that you don't want, okay? So we get things in there that we want by adjusting that up and down. And those fingers, they're on what is called the shoe, and the shoe shakes. It goes back and forth like this. So that shakes the material back to the back of the combine, but at the same time letting the material fall through it. So the stuff falls through from the rotor and the concave down onto the shoe separates it even more, lets the clean grain get through, and anything that didn't go through the concave or anything that didn't go through the cleaning shoe then dumps out of the back of the combine in this region. And different combines have different ways of doing their residue control. This one here has spreaders on it that are like paddles. So these spin and they throw the crop residue back out on the field and spread it out so we don't have a big pile of straw all in one place. Because remember, we just did 35 feet. Okay, so it spreads that residue back out, and the grain itself goes into augers that are at the very bottom of the combine, come across right here to the bottom of the combine, up an elevator. We've talked about elevators in different episodes of Tug Hill Farm, Professor Haben Science Cabin. You'd think I'd be better at this, wouldn't you? Anyway, of how elevators work to move grain up to the top of something, like a corn crib. So the elevator carries it up to the top, and we fill the grain tank up at the top of the combine, which they vary in size with the size of your combine. Some of your older machines only hold a couple hundred bushel. Pretty common sizes are in that 300 to 400 bushel range nowadays. And then that then gets unloaded either into a truck or onto a grain cart. And we covered the grain cart in a different episode where I was showing how we were harvesting the corn in the field. So you already have a bit of an understanding of how that goes. So, not fully in depth. We didn't tear the combine apart to see the inside, but you have a pretty good idea of how soybean harvest works now, how it's going to go when it goes to the field. Hopefully we get started later today with soybean harvest, but right now we're harvesting corn. We have 2 machines on this farm today. So we're harvesting corn with the other combine, and as soon as it dries out a little bit more, we'll get this one fired up and get going on some soybeans. So thanks for joining me on another episode of Professor Haben Science Cabin. I hope you learned something. I hope this is helpful to you sometime in your future. And I hope to see you back someday watching another episode of Professor Haben Science Cabin. With that, I wish you a wonderful day. Take care.